I was attracted to it, but I was also apprehensive about it. I was also a little bit scared about doing it. Simply because I'd never played anyone quite so ordinary. In that he's just an ordinary guy with a slightly extraordinary job. And most of the characters that I've played have been rather high-key and not particularly naturalistic. I mean, things like this, you know, the comedy spy, Johnny English and things like that, they're sort of reasonably normal, unlike Mr. Bean, who's rather extreme and anarchic and physically peculiar. So I knew I was going to be a long way away from that. But that didn't worry me and doesn't worry me because I'm a great believer that whether you're playing a serious role or a comedy role, you're using the same skills, you're just exercising slightly different muscles, if you like, slightly different creative muscles. I can't honestly say that I prepared for it. I certainly didn't have to prepare for it physically very much. I just had to get myself into a slightly thoughtful place, I suppose. That was quite useful, particularly for the first film, which is quite a ruminative piece, and he's under a lot of pressure in the story. But I didn't have to prepare particularly vocally, in that I thought, you know, once we decided that he wasn't going to be speaking in a French accent, then the whole job becomes an awful lot easier.
Who's the victim, Maigret?
The victim's name was Georgette Lacroix. She was a housewife from Montmartre. She leaves a husband and 4 young children.
I had to play it in order to find out about it.
I have nothing to tell you.
You have him under arrest.
Gentlemen, I have no announcement to make.
He's quite a passive character. He sits and he watches, he observes, and as Simenon often says, he tries to understand rather than judge.
What are your methods, Chief Inspector?
I need to understand what attracts this man to these women at this time.
The whole of Paris has theories as to why he is attracted to these women at this time.
That is a very important key, I think, to the character, and I hope that is something that I've been able to convey. It's because actually I'm quite a serious person by instinct, and I think I'm quite a thoughtful person by instinct. I'm someone who's quite happy to sit in a room, you know, with no television or music playing, and just look around it and think for extended periods of time. I'm someone who's quite happy on his own. I'm someone who's, I think, generally quite thoughtful. So in that respect, I found that aspect of Simenon's Maigret to be relatively easy.
I think Maigret is such an enduring character because he probes the psychology of the criminal.
Do you love your mother?
My mother loves me. She loves me very much.
She makes you feel special.
She always has.
Even though you're not. Are you?
He is a man who loves to deconstruct his adversary.
My belief is that the killer will try to show us that he's still out there. Lapointe, I want 12 volunteers from the women's section to walk around Montmartre alone tonight.
Alone?
I want them to be trained in self-defense, and like the victims, I want them to be above average height and brown-haired. Thank you.
You want them to be attacked? He hasn't made a mistake yet, Chief.
If we do our job, they'll be safe.
I think character is a bit of a myth. It's how you relate to other people. And that's what it is, and I think that's what's interesting about this and this kind of this kind of triage of inspectors is how we relate to each other. I do think you can only do so much until you're on set. You never quite know what you're going to do until you see what the other actors are doing and how they're relating to each other and how they're delivering their lines. And that's when you can start to get... That's when it gets exciting.
I think all actors have their different route to how they work as an actor, how they find their character. There's an amazing resource online where some people have made this incredible compendium of everything to do with Maigret, all the novels, where all the characters turn up, what happens, at what stages in their sort of, careers, characters throughout the books. And so I was able to go onto that, look up Lapointe and figure out everything that he'd done prior to the first novel we did, and where he kind of goes afterwards, so he could really help me pitch him where he was in his career, which is at this point very, very sort of early on.
I must have read 9 or 10 of the books, I suppose, up to now, and they're undoubtedly very useful source material, and they set the world and they set the tone of the stories better in many ways, in my opinion, than they set the character.
Just make sure you get him. Who is this then? Maigret, you get him. You've got it. Suspect. Wait, turn around, please.
Are you going to take a photograph of me? I dare you to do it.
So my father wrote 75 Maigret novels and 38 short stories featuring Maigret. But that is only a small, accounts for a small portion of his total number of novels that he wrote, which are more than 250.
Was it your man? We believe it's the same person who killed before.
Can you give us a
So that's 5 Maigret.
Yes.
It's quite hard-edged, it's quite dark. An awful lot of Simenon stuff, even for its time, was considered quite dark. And if tastes have hardened as the decades have gone by, then it means when you go back to Simenon, you think, of course, this feels very modern.
Most crime writers working today acknowledge Georges Simenon as the godfather of the modern detective novel.
And as far as the number of books sold, I have no idea. I just know that Wikipedia mentions something like 1 billion. But obviously I cannot guarantee that number. I don't know where they got it from.
It seemed interesting at this time to go back to, as it were, the master and reinterpret it for the 21st century.
Paris in 1955 was a city in search of its identity. It was 10 years after the war, only 5 years from the 60s. It was a place that had brutal poverty. However, it was also a city that had Christian Dior, it had Vogue covers being shot near the Eiffel Tower, and it had a generation who would have only been very young at the end of the war and really weren't part of the wake of the tragedy of the Second World War. I really wanted to reflect that contrast of younger energy, the younger bars. You had a sense of young people really looking forward to with a sense of energy and optimism. But you also had a city that was in a way still reeling, I think, from the ravages of the Second World War.
It was certainly helpful being in Budapest, where we have shot the Maigret movies so far. Because it is a European city, and although you could probably find locations that were vaguely convincing French-ish looking places in London, say, or elsewhere in Britain, I don't think they would ever have had that definitely European look. There is a look. I mean, Budapest is not the same as Paris, although it's far better in terms of creating a period Paris than it would be trying to go to Paris.
There's so much of Budapest that hasn't been brought into sort of like the 21st century as a look and feel. It's been left alone, and it's very easy to kind of just flip it back into a sort of a period, like mid-century. The modern signage in Paris is actually in some ways harder to hide than adding our period signage in Budapest. And Budapest still has that sort of wonderful sort of patina that you might have got in Paris after, but you certainly won't get now. So I think there's so many locations in this city that work so well for us that have that texture.
The sets on this production have been unlike anything I've ever been involved in. And it just allowed you to play, so it didn't feel like you were in this tiny little film studio. It felt sometimes like you were doing a play, because you had a whole playing area to move around in. You can literally walk across that vast room, the inspector's room, which was incredible. That was a real gift, I have to say. There's all our supporting artists that really gave a huge, weight to all those scenes, all the other policemen there.
There has been location shooting in Paris also. There is establishing shots of the Quai des Orfèvres for real, the actual building, so we can show that location moment, and then we can cut to our Budapest entrance and into the building.
Now, we're going to find a lot of rubbish, and we may not find his killer, but we need to find where Poliensky was heading.
My father said that he never invented anything, and therefore, for him to be able to write about anybody, he had to have an intimate knowledge of how these people thought and lived, and about the way they expressed emotions, etc.
What do you do when you get home, Jean-Pierre?
Give my wife a kiss.
When I get home, I get changed out of my suit jacket.
The way my father satisfied his quest for details was, one was precisely to live the lives of all the people he was going to write about, or rather, live as many lives as possible and then use those lives as material for his novels. That's why he traveled so much around the world. That's why he did so many things in his life, why he was so active. The Maigret novels, he would write directly on the typewriter, and he would write a chapter a day, and because there are about 10 chapters, that would take about 10 days. And then he would what he called revise them in about 2 or 3 days. So the whole process, with an interruption of a few days between the writing and the revision. So the whole process took about 2 weeks. He never started a book knowing the end. He knew the beginning. He knew the click that would create the tension of the story. But then, he just followed his characters as he wrote. And that is what was, I think, a key technique of his. And the story came as he wrote. But one must remember that, before being able to write that way, he went through what he called his apprenticeship, which was 10 years of writing pop novels under pseudonyms. And it is, he said that he needed those 10 years to really learn about all the techniques of bringing somebody in a scene, out of a scene, walk in, walk out, have, interactions, intertwine various plots, etc. And that is something that's just like learning how to play the violin. If you have to think about how you play the violin when you're trying to play Tchaikovsky, you will never make it. And this is how the feeling he had about his own trade.
Now, I love what happens before filming, which is talking about it, rehearsing it, being involved with the development of the script, rehearsing, things like that. That's absolutely fine because it feels creative and relatively relaxing. And then after the shooting, which is particularly if one gets involved, which I'm not with Maigret, in editing or post-production a lot, that I also find genuinely enjoyable, because you can create a completely different film, should you wish. It's a very, very interesting creative process, the editing and the post-production. I tend to only enjoy my work once it's done and is being seen and is being enjoyed.
It's usually always about emotions. I think it's always about the emotional journey of the story and narrative, because to tell a good story, it's usually quite complex. It's not just words. There's so many layers. I don't think that character can be seen separately from narrative.
I'm a great believer that the job of the actor, more than anything else, is not to present a character, it's to tell a story. And the mechanism by which you tell a story is to try to create a character that people believe in and people want to follow. The most important thing is the story. They've got to want to know what happens next.
Is she hurt?
Is this all you've got?
Is it over?
Yes.